ultimate new writing series event tonight, partnered with the Black Studies Project, which we're very excited about. My name is Nina Mamazinian. I'm curator for the Archive New Poetry here at Geisel Library in our special collections and archives. A quick note that if anybody is interested in viewing and working with the Shirley Ann Williams papers, we do have those in special collections, and they're really amazing to look at. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me about those. A couple other quick things. If you need to leave the reading early, if you need to get to a class, please just remember to use that back door so you don't disturb the reading up at the front. And a very big thank you to the bookstore for being here and selling books. A little bit different this time is they are out in the reception area instead of being in the room with us. So don't forget to go out there and buy some books. Anna Joy?
I'm Anna Joy Springer, and I just welcome you here. I'm in literature, and I just want to thank the Archive for New Poetry and Black Studies Project for making this event possible. We're really excited for this week. And I'm just going to bring up Sarah Johnson next to introduce what we're doing here.
Please, no need to clap. I'll clap for Professor Girmay when she comes up to the stage. My name is Sarah Johnson, and I just first want to say a very sincere thank you for being here, because this is week 10. It's 5 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. It has been raining all day, so thank you for all showing up, for your presence, and for coming to share this event with us. I wanted to start just by saying a little bit about Professor Shirley Ann Williams and what this residency is. So Professor Shirley Ann Williams, she was a novelist. She was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize various times. She won an Emmy. She was a TV producer. She was a playwright. And of course, she was a poet. She also, we were fortunate enough to have her as our colleague. She worked in the literature department. She actually was born in Bakersfield, grew up in Fresno, has lots of memories, and writes a lot about, picking cotton in the fields, with Fresno, with her family. And eventually, she studied in various places. She made it here to UCSD, and she worked in our department for many years. She served as the former chair of our Department of Literature for a while. And she passed away in 1999 of cancer. So for those of you who take classes in literature, you might have noticed we have one of our teaching rooms, one of our seminar rooms is named after her. And as part of the Black Studies Project, we were really invested in doing something that brought her memory, not just the memory and her legacy, but really gave us an occasion to read her work again, to teach her work again. And so I also want to give it a shout out to all of my colleagues. Just raise your hands. There are a lot of literature colleagues here. A lot of students who've been reading her poems for the past few weeks and what have you. So thank you for teaching her work and again reminding us of how deeply she's missed and how much she meant to our department. We have been working with the new writing series, and we've been working with Nina. Nina, thank you. Thank you for Special Collections. Our two poets who have come. Yes, thank you, Nina. Our two poets who have come to be part of this series, poet Robin Cost-Lewis and now Professor Girmay, have both had a chance to go into Special Collections and look at what's here. And what we thought we would do is start the reading tonight just with a few clips of Professor Shirley Ann Williams herself. These are clips. We were fortunate. Lorraine is not in here. She's off getting food for you all for a little bit later. But these were compiled using the materials that are here in Special Collections, and we think it's really important for you to feel her presence, Professor Williams' presence in the room with us today as we gather here in her honor. So I'm going to show this clip, and then I'm going to turn it over to Professor Gabriel Beaumarchais, who is back here somewhere. Oh, he's right here, sorry, who is a poet as well and also a professor here in the literature department who will be introducing our guest tonight. Okay. I can't even hit play right. I'm a Mac person, you all. Thank you.
The waters don't sing in that land. They run sly and silent, deep in the ground. The freeway is a river of light rounding the base of Mount Soledad, its distant drone a part of the night. I've listened in the darkness as the river dimmed to the fitful passing of solitary cars and heard the coyotes in the canyon crying their survival to the strange land. I booted up one day, walked out across the mesa that fronts along my place, till the land was a shallow cup around me, and the houses were lost in the distance on its rim. The plants were the only life I saw. Muted greens, dry browns, bursts of loud purple and lighter blues, brilliant in the spring light. Something rustled the undergrowth, a jet murmured in the softly clabbered sky. The Indian dead are here, buried beneath Spanish place names in the cities of the pioneers, and the droning silence is witness to what each has claimed, what each owned. My father's grave is here somewhere, his tail lost like that jet in clabber, his children scattered along the river, voices singing to the night.
So thank you again, Aracelis, Professor Girmay, for being here to help us celebrate this legacy. We are very fortunate tonight because we will be hearing work that you basically have never shared in public before, some of it. So you will be amongst the first people to get to hear some of the new work. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Gabriel now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that electrifying performance. And I want to say good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us tonight, this evening. And I'm pleased to introduce this year's Shirley Ann Williams Writer in Residence. And today we are fortunate to have a living presence of poetic magnificence amongst us. Please permit me to introduce our esteemed poet in our own voice, as evoked in the opening of the poem, Elegy. I, Aracelis K. Wayne Girmay, the narrator author, born in the United States. My roots, Eritrea, Puerto Rico, African America. In this opening of the Black Maria, published in 2016, Girmay locates herself within the history her poetry grapples with. And to echo Derek Walcott, the sea is history. The poem reconfigures the elegy form through the African poetics of emulation that finds sonic enunciation in the repetition of the and sound. In this historical morning work, Girmay reenacts the dangerous journeys of African and Black bodies through, as catalogued in the final stanza of the poem, the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, the Caribbean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, the afterworld sea, sea of death, any sea. Engaging the choreography of history as she maps out its who, when, and where, And of course, the poem appears like a stage direction because it's all written in italics. Of this drama, this tragic drama, the poetry explores, and its historical definition of times. It's almost like a definition of times that we encounter in the poem. The poet introduces herself as a griot, implicated in the long memory of that which she speaks and performs with remarkable artistry. She introduces herself in the co-presence of, I quote, we the living and you the dead. Aracelis Girmay is a prolific poet who makes poetry across genre. She is currently Knight Family Professor of Creative Writing and Professor of English at Stanford University. A versatile poet, Girmay is the author of the poetry collection The Black Maria, with which I opened the introduction, published by BOA in 2016, Kingdom Animalia, published by the same press in 2011, and Teal, published by Cobstone in 2007. For this work, she was a finalist for the New Start International Prize for Literature. Her works have been named finalists for the National Book Critics Circle Award, the Austin Wright Legacy Award, and the Connecticut Book Award. Also, Girmay has received fellowships from the Whiting Foundation, Shivitella Raneri, and the National Endowment for the Arts, and of course, the Cave Canem Foundation, among others. Moreover, Girmay is a poet who works in the company of artists. She is the author of a chapbook and Was a Flower, published in 2024, made in collaboration with book artist Valentina Amestica. Other work includes picture book collaborations, one with her sister, Ariana Fields, titled Who Do You Know?, published in 2021 by Enchanted Lion Books, and most recently with artist Diana Ejaita, entitled Kamau and Zuzu Find a Way, also published in 2024 by the same press. A collage artist in her own right, she published a collage story poem titled Changing, Changing, published in 2005. Girmay not only writes the world in poetic language, she also does the work of imagination in compelling prose. Her recent works, including poetry and prose, have been published or are forthcoming in Astra, the Paris Review Online, Periphery Journal, Jewish Current, the New York Times Magazine, and Eflux, among others. In addition to stellar accomplishments in poetry and prose writing, Girmay works as an anthologist and editor. She is the editor of How to Carry Water, Selected Poems of Lucille Clifton, published in 2020, which was at the center of the beautiful conversation on Clifton's poetic craft with our own Kazim Ali yesterday, and I was lucky to be there. It was exciting, and I felt refreshed after the conversation. She is also the editor of So We Can Know, Writers of Color on Pregnancy, Loss, Abortion, and Birth, published in 2023. Girmay is on the editorial board of the African Poetry Book Fund and is in her last year as the editor-at-large of the Blessing the Bolts selections of the BOA editions. She is currently completing an experiment for the stage commissioned by the Authors Guild. A new poetry book titled Grain of All Heads is slated for publication this fall. I hope we will jam our hands together for that forthcoming publication. I look forward to reading it. Girmay delicately crafts poems with deep somatic, historical, and spatial consciousness. As highlighted on our Poetry Foundation profile, I quote, our poems trace the connections of transformation and loss across cities. And I would add, spaces more broadly, not just cities, and bodies. Endearing formal and visceral postures, our poem sits with the lived grief of the African diaspora and its joyful sighs of refusal. In our poetic universe, the body functions as a hieroglyph of historical grief and the potential of rechanneling that grief as a radical force for living otherwise. Considering the poem, The Black Maria, that stages the American drama of the racialized body's encounter with the open trap of quotidian death, we see that this poem, which is inspired, of course, by the experience of the black astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson's constant confrontation with police violence, we see the recurrence of the image of the body in the constellation of forces. And I quote just 2 lines, reading in italics again. Body in space, body of dark, body of light. In this parallelism structured by the repetition of 3 nominal phrases, the body is a constant figure emanating in different configurations. In fact, the body in Germai's poetry is a complex figure that emerges conjunctively as cosmic, oceanic, ecologic, and somatic figure. The parallelism in Black Maria carries an incantatory force. If you read it again and again, it appears like an incantation that relays the enigma of racial violence, a painfully familiar scene. But what does the poem want us to remember? And I quote from the poem. The boy who wants to understand the large and glorious unhuman mystery of the galaxy. The boy who, despite America, has not been killed by the murderous jury of his neighbor's imagination and wound. This poem wants only the moon in its hair and the boy on the roof. Like the anti-apartheid South African poet, Dennis Brutus, who demands in the poem Sharpeville, which commemorates the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, that the reader remembers not only what, and I quote, apartheid declares with its snarling guns, but also what black bodies enact, and I quote, as the unquenchable will for freedom. Germai's poems ask that we remember the brown boy in the poem The Black Maria and his cosmic aspiration, a force of unquenchable dream. The brown boy whose life cannot be contained by the racist gaze of his deranged world. In a 2013 Boston Review conversation with other poets on the subject of women's poetry, gender, and the body, Germai closed with a thought-provoking reflection on the role of poetry in the world. And I want to quote. While I do not think that a poem necessarily pushes its writer or reader to reconsider or challenge the construct we have inherited, I do think it is a potential space within which, if we are rigorous and careful, we might work to begin to articulate some of our tendencies of or in seeing, staying quiet, and organizing the world. The poet shows us that poetry is a careful and rigorous work of the imagination, a way of sensing a potential world beyond the logic of domination, a potential space for experimenting with life, of inventing the world anew in the perpetual catastrophes we dwell in. Listen to Germai's prayer poem, and this is one of my best poems, a meta poem that plays with the meditative tradition, recalling Horace and Archibald MacLeish, the last ritual offering of Kingdom Animalia, entitled Ars Poetica. May the poems be the little snail's trail. Everywhere I go, every inch, quiet record of the foot silver prayer. I lived once. Thank you. I was here. As a Yoruba proverb says, ìròyìn ò tá mojúbà, which I translate as Hearsay is a poor substitute for experience. I have presented the hearsay to you, and now I invite you to the real experience of Jeremiah's poetry. With an ocean-moving applause, please join me in welcoming the incredible poet, Jeremiah, Aracelis Jeremiah. Please, let's join our hands together. Thank you.
Wow, what is ooh. No, thank you. What a beautiful introduction. I'm so grateful for your attention and close reading, which my heart is beating. Thank you, Gabriel. Thanks to you all for being here. I have some notes, and because otherwise, who knows what will happen. You'll see. Yeah, not just week 10, but this week 10 of these months. Just very grateful to be here with you and for all it took to be here. I am humbled to get to read toward you all some work that is not new, and then mostly work that's new that or that is also not new. Not new to me, but I haven't read in public. And I want to thank the Black Studies Project, your brilliances and presences. Thank you for what you think and make and dream, and for all the ways that you attend. I keep saying I feel so welcomed, so cared for, so attended to. And I want to thank all of you, and especially Sarah Johnson, Angela Sofer, Lorraine Marcone. I should have asked, how do you say it? Marcone? Anna Joy, Kazam for yesterday's and today's. And I wanted to begin with two poems. The first is by Hiba Abu Nada. Some of you might know her work, a brilliant Palestinian poet and novelist who was killed by an Israeli airstrike on her home in Khan Yunis in October 2023, October 20th, 2023. And this poem was translated by the incredible Huda Fakhreddin, who's an incredible translator and scholar at Penn. Translated from the Arabic into English. It's called Not Just Passing. Can you hear me okay? I'm here. Yesterday, a star said to the little light in my heart, we are not just transients. Do not die beneath this glow. Some wanderers go on walking. You were first created out of love, so carry nothing but love to those who are trembling. From our names, from what remained of heart's yearning. And since it came of age, this ancient language has taught us how to heal others with our longing. Softly, we pass over wounds like purposeful gauze, a hint of relief, an aspirin. Oh, little light in me, don't die, even if all the galaxies of the world, oh, little light in me, say, enter my heart in peace, all of you, come in. And I realized as I was reading that might be, I think something got cut off in the middle, so please find it. You can find it on Mizna. And then this poem, new to me. It's so incredible to hear Shirley Ann Williams, her voice, and to meet her work. And in the archives yesterday with Nina, thank you so much.
I had just come from a conversation with Kazem about Lucille Clifton, and names came up, and Dion Brand, and naming, and so when we were in the archives, I was looking at the Peacock Poems by Shirley Ann Williams, and came across this poem, I See My Life. 1. I see my life by my son's eyes, know his mind is in some part my own, that he carries me as he moves through the world. I am some % of the sum of my mother and my father, of the grandparents, the old ones from whom I get the shape of my hands, my head, maybe my walk and the eyes that stare from this face. I don't know all that comes through them to me and him who are now their factors in the world, yet I am me, he is he. 2. We're named in the sight of the people in our family houses, in each of our own hearts. I didn't learn how to call myself until I was 24. I cling to the secret childhood names only a very few can know. I gave my son 4 names. He added 2 more. In the privacy of his own room, he calls himself by others I may never know. 3. My son springs up from the bottom of the pool, head back, eyes closed, water sheeting his body with light and caught like stars in the dark burrs of his hair. It's not the sun whose shine dances on the waves. That is his face. And although I see the name he has named himself, I have to say that again. And although I see the name he has named himself, I would never tell it, even if my mind, my mouth could say it. Yeah. I think I'll move right from there to this called X, with a quote from Homero Aridis, un templo que nos habla y no nos nombra. For months we made so much information passing back and forth through us, silence striated with cells, subterranean, an idea I am getting at for how the hair grows gray and there is birth and death, and what is unnameable about us exists. Hawthorne, sunlight. So when the nurse held up our cord because it was a shining knot, we had already been each other's for at least a single star. It is not true who says you don't remember. From a distance, I could feel you looking down something like a long dirt road, waving me off, knowing or not knowing that would be it. Should I call you Ade? Mma? Should I call you grandmother? Black of the green leaf, black of the pot, how all our lives so far were touched with them. And now, a veil of black roses across both our stomachs. The nurse named our dog eyes supernumerary, summoning our constellation, and suddenly milk murmuring in the flowers. Un templo que nos habla y no nos nombra. It was you. It was you from the sky all those times ago who threw that ladder down to us. And now, a face to touch. My love and blackest heart, my true whose eye of voices. Even when we did, we could not name you. So I've been thinking a lot about this experience of my father becoming suddenly ill and recovering from a stroke weeks after my first child was born, and thinking about like the different times in them and what felt like it was overlapping between them and what felt so different. And this is a poem called Ceremony for Remembering the Doorless World. October. Where 3 wee horses mark ground, turn snake our necks inside the Guayla circle, my Aranchi. Etan, child fox out, my 4th mouth you drink, then the year went dark. And our own flowers and fires and what we thought we were. Though still our faces opened to the whooping of coyotes. I'm hearing so many echoes. Not here, I mean. At the canyon rim, how they throw their voices out, falling, starless veils of lace over our still black heads. Awake I sit, centuried with all my sight, and the purple fennel musting after rain. This hour, become my canyon, become my bottom of the world, listening for your breaths to ward off non-breath. Parent, my son a flicker barely born already, withstand the blanched eye of our grief. One morning with our faces crying into the arroyo, it answers, once there were no doors on earth, not a single one. So when I listen, I still hear you still kicking the ball, laughing as you say the story of endurance, and the women flutter, a flock of sound suddenly lifts. They throw their voice birds over the births. So we are 3 and simultaneous earths inside your coil of father hair, to which I press my ear to hear the histories. Then the bell, then the whir of doctors above your beds, your noiseless struggle to be. Stay, say, you are my heres and furthers. Daddy, now I join the mothers. Remember, I used to hold you. This is from the first section of El Elegy that Gabriel attended to. I guess what I want to say is Aboy Haile was my dad's grandfather. Wow, that's so interesting. My grandfather's brother. And he shared these words that you'll hear with me. He was really sick in 2008 when I was in Eritrea, one of our family towns is outside of the capital, Asmara, a small place called Absobdo, and he had called me. There was a blackout, so he was in the bed, and we had walked from one family house to his, and the candles were on. He was in the bed, and he was like, told my dad, tell her everything I'm saying, because I could only understand a few things. So it was this, like, he was speaking to me, he was looking at me, and my dad was to the side. There were, like, cousins in the room, and I was on the bed next to him, and he was looking at me, and my dad, I could just hear his voice. Beloveds, beneath the surface of your last place, and this is written to those who are crossing the Mediterranean or trying to cross the Mediterranean. Beloveds, beneath the surface of your last place, the tiny, oblivious fishes form wreaths above the sea grasses and their long reach. Some mornings in my own city far away I run to greet you, come to me as sea, and carry myself out into your long, dark time like a child meeting its older cousins. I touch your teeth and give you the single word of my body. I am a woman again at the side of Aboy Haile's bed. Aboy, who is 96, he is brushing my acacia hair. He is holding my arm. He says, moving his hand to mean all around us, that this is my home. He means Adisolto, but he also means the world. Though I think in America that I am there and he is here, that we are different or far, really, we are each other. My bones are your bones, he says. His teeth are my teeth, and my smiling is his smiling. He holds my arm tight until it is a stone, a bone. He smooths my hair with force. I am a horse. The long, dark skin of the water, the talking Aboy of the water, the brushing back my acacia hair, washing my face. When we are done, I cross the sea back into air and return to the traffic of the streets I know. I am marked by the dead, your sea letters of salt and weeping. Now I am ready to lay myself down on the earth, to listen to the instructions for how to talk of love and land, to sing of home in the horrible years, and to fill my language like the stars do with the light, anyway, of a future tense. Some of you know the poet Joy Harjo. You know her work. This is a poem. It's really a found poem. It's just documenting what I witnessed at this conference where she was invited. I think it was Dodge Poetry. She was invited to be on a panel of speakers. And one thing that I shared with students and my children, I learned so much about myself in this moment where she was up on this panel and everyone's kind of speaking authoritatively on poetry and history, and she was like looking around other places. And I remember feeling so nervous and like, wait, what's happening? Like there was like a kind of like, it was like she would not cohere, which I love now, but I was like, so nervous. And then she began to speak, and it was a different language, and it's all I remember, which I sang the poem from that day, on poetry and history, just how important it is that we speak our way of speaking. After Joy Harjo, on a panel of men who spoke about history and poetry, she sat quietly for much of it. They, the men, were saying strong things, good things, but in authoritative voices that knew they knew things, and she remained the only quiet one. She listened as if she weren't listening. Her face looked forward. Her quiet seemed distant. It had a straight back. And then she interrupted one of the men and said something like, "That reminds me of the time." And she spoke of a fellow Native American teacher in her region who committed suicide near the end of one of the years, and how he must have been hurting and isolated and in pain, but not many people spoke about that, or spoke about his death or their loss when he died. It was swept under the rug. That was the phrase she used, and she said she was at home one day and looking out of the window, and she noticed a black thread or string there, floating in the frame, and she observed it for a while, floating there, until she realized that that black string was grief. The grief of the professor, the grief of the students, her own grief, the grief of silence, a historical grief, and that she knew that it was her job to take that thread and put it somewhere, weave it into the larger tapestry. She made a gesture then, as if the tapestry were just above her head. She said it was her job to put that grief in its place, or that else, someone else, some child or grown person would be out walking and just walk right into it without knowing what it was they'd walked into, what they had then inherited in a way, what they were then carrying and feeling, the danger of that, the grief of that. And that was what she said about poetry and history. And that is all I remember from all of the things that were said that entire day. Thank you. I feel your here-ness. Thank you. So many stars in these poems. I'm going to read a couple more. I'll read until 6. This is to my dad, GK. We were talking about texts earlier. He was such an interesting texter, and had all of these, like, my son is Alim, and so he would say AKA, which means Alim, Kamelaha. Like, he does, like, I don't know, he likes systems, I guess. And he would always sign GK. So there's a lot of GK poems, but notes for a sound you were GK. And also cousin Jean Valentine, who I know is dear to you and dear to me. She's one of the people I'm thinking about here too. To learn from the poet who, it seems to me, having searched and found the words behind the gates, unlatched one after the other, and watched them run to another energy. Some violet, braying with vitality, some tired, strong, willing themselves toward the morning. So in the lead's great trace, I pull your name out of my live hand, trying to write the notes for a sound you were, that ran out of this life you have gone out of, so that I may follow you. Where? We played the tape then, death. We turned the tape over. I felt briefly bright with your mother's eye. When I read your name on the sticker of your finished casket, it sobered me of grief 1 second. How wrong it was, of rage I was, the font and code, something I wasn't supposed to see, a corporate coffee order receipt to die in the U.S. industry. But her eye was a god, it flashed in me as a flash of ice, like in Asmara. It took you off, it had done it before. Or should I say she had done it before. Not a sound I could make, not even human, though my humanness was a part of it, a material point, a filament of time through which she surged. Stone by stone I knew then, each of our heads built around a star, then death, then carry what can be carried unto another star. And thank you. And I'll close with this poem, which is 3 sections, so timing-wise, I think it works out this nicely. And it's called The Dog. And I don't think I'll say more than that, except thinking about pregnancy and birth and so many other things. The dog. 1. It's in 3 parts. Grown out that great eye, all shouting, shat and dribbled, growing larger. The midwives used their cloths to shine, my mirror. Across 2 years, the babies fell, first one, then the other out of that obsidian, my exhalations, once with wires, the other all free. Each of them spinning knots in their cords, I feared and feared, one for each one. I had read somewhere small lines of Indian history describing a tradition of opening all the braids and knots of a person birthing in order to assist with her effacement. I grew effaced. Each eye carried one wolf, and the memory came back to me from when I worked in Bluefields one summer under the guidance of Dona Lidia, interviewing Black women community leaders for an oral history. And in my mouths there, with her learning, I sometimes passed a table. On my way to the office, a table manned by men who sold glass beads and other things I can't remember now. But what I remember most are the dark, hay-colored pelts, the color of dark, hay-colored dogs, painted with black markings from what seemed to me to be shoe polish and stripes. And when I finally asked, the men said they were the pelts of women who disguised themselves as wild animals. But did they say dogs, or is that just what comes to me now? The animals that did their wandering and work, and sometimes these women shed their pelts in some secret place to become human women again, and these men stole them, which meant the women could not return to them, and that in these pelts was some of the power. They could be bought. Though I don't remember the men at the table expressing any interest in selling them to me, who knows why I think of this now, except for 10 years I have been inside the dog. The night when that first labor was done, I stood at the mirror, aberrating, matted, and from one flat eye heard Jackal, Jackal, who walked the perimeter, who led the dead, our ankles spotted with blood, and stomachs, black roses off of which our babies fed, again contracting, purple as a lens, subject, sound broken, dispersed onto every limb. I am not freeing, could not lay down the skin. 2. In one beginning, a roving eye, I took my notes and watched for symptoms. The offices hummed with ugly off-white energy and large beige computers, antiseptic light. Nothing was wild. I said my name to a person on the other side of the glass. I signed my forms with a pen kept on a cold silver leash, drone of lights, but that the heart is barking. 3. For the children, for you. There is a beginning before all of this, which does not begin with the hospital or even grandmother. As a child, I wanted to be able to lay the egg, to be the mother of a chick and steward it with my heat. Later, the science and pleasures, later the blood and where to bury the placenta. How I tried to open the knots in my closed eyes. I opened these knots and filled my milk with trees. The cleft trees I passed my body through, I crawled below their roots, I closed my eyes and filled ourselves with dog. The dog of my womanhood, the dogs of the battles of births, the dog of the wane of the heart, dog who fed children, its long milk run all through our middle. The land dreams, quartz. Dreaming, we have become its parallel. I take my place in line to come back. In my milk, closed eyes inside of eyes, I send the sentence. We are born onto the bareness of the earth, thousands of ways. Lale lo lai, lale lo le. I feel the mother's hurry to add to my milk for you, a basket, coffee, shiro, and hay. Thank you.
we should take a minute. I don't know. Like I need a minute. But yes, if anyone would like to start us off this evening. I can start it. I'm going to ask a broad question, if that's okay. As I think about all of these cycles of, well, particularly birth and loss, anyway, that's the one I'm still really processing. But could you talk to us, in our conversation this afternoon, we talked a lot about, we have a lot of people, a lot of writers here in the room who are working through their own family histories, who are writing about family, and if you could just reflect a little bit, especially now that we've heard this, this poem to GK, right, just about some... off now. No, here we go. Some of the joys, not just the challenges, but the joys about writing about family and bringing family into your work. I look across your poems across the years. There's so many tributes to family and the influence that family from language to kinship, all of these different ways that you bring family into your work. Could you talk to us just a little bit about that? Just to get us started. I don't even want you to come over here and see where you can do that.
Can you hear me? Or yes? I'm thinking about Brandon's poem and just like that kind of what I read as an abundance of influences and languages and people that we all carry and have, and I love that. And I see a model in like the carrying of all it is that you have into spaces that are maybe a couple pages long, but then also so much bigger. And I've been thinking a lot about that with time, like how do you? For a while I thought I felt so shattered by my dad's death and also the death of my dear friend Aisha Moon, Camille Aisha Moon, who's an amazing poet. And for a while I thought I felt like so disoriented that I couldn't find the measures. I think about Audre Lorde talking about uses to be erotic. Like I couldn't find the measures of desire and joy and presence that I was used to feeling when they were here. And I remember going and sitting down in the living room and saying, I don't know, I might be done. Like I can't feel what it takes to feel. What a poem can be and do. And then I just kind of I kept reading, and I wanted to just read and read, and then somewhere along the way, some like bits of language, but not just like especially language that felt like it was like had openings in it, openings in sound, or where time felt compressed, and I could like the glitches, and I could say to my dad the thing that I felt. Remember when you were a boy, I used to hold you and speak to them both at once. And so then the writing became a ceremony, a prayer, a place of practice for like attunement, which is what it has been. And so that has felt like, even in loss and grief and other things, like joy and memory and laughter, like I could feel him laughing too. And the poems have had something to do with that because they've helped me to pay attention or to like make possibility or find possibility in that compression that has given me like life really.
Before the pandemic, there was this guy, Phil, who always used to come to all of our readings, an older gentleman. Do you remember Phil? Yeah. And he always used to start the Q&A, and he wouldn't really ask a question. He would make this. He would just make a beautiful observation, sort of a little mini speech. And I don't know if any of us knew who he was. He probably could have been a retired professor. He sounded that smart, or he could have just been this old dude who came. And then we haven't seen him since that time, so we didn't know what happened to Phil, but I leaned back and I said to Brandon, when you were waiting for someone to ask the question, I said, I miss Phil. And then that microphone shrieked.
Oh, wow.
So I just wanted to tell you why the microphone might have shrieked. It might have been Phil on the other side of the veil. I don't know where Phil is. He hasn't come back, so he may be alive and well somewhere in La Jolla, or he may have been shrieking at you. That's it. In honor of Phil, I have no question.
That's so good. I feel like I miss that about, well, maybe it happens everywhere. I'm sure it happens everywhere. I remember in New York a lot it happened that I'd be at a reading at the library or something, and then somebody would stand up and say you mentioned Malcolm X, did you know, and then they'd be like, when I was little, and everyone would just be listening. It was like storytelling, story sharing, story. And I remember this one time, somebody was like, you had that poem about a goat, you know you're not supposed to look goats in the eye. She said, you know you don't look goat in the eye. And I was like, oh, well, I did. And I was like, I respect that, but also, and then we had this whole back and forth, and then she spoke about the why, and I just remember, I don't even know what I said, but as I was talking, I was passing the mic, and then she said volume, and all I could say was, she said volume, and then I passed it back. But I feel like that, you don't know what happens. I feel grateful for them.
Thank you for reading. It was beautiful. I have a question about sort of imagined geographies and sort of pushing the boundaries of how we see space, especially in your poem about Abu Haile. And you have this kind of beautiful rejection and also kind of embrace of the distinctions between two different spaces and yet also the oneness of space. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak a little bit into that space, especially because I think Robin Costa-Lewis, who had the SAW last year, does such a beautiful job as well of sort of challenging how we see space. That's my question. Also broad.
I love that. I mean, with Robin, I remember when I first read the beginning of her last book, I promise, this is what happened. I began that first piece, that first little bit, the sister's birth, and I closed it, and I was like, and then I said, oh my God, and then I read it again, and I was like, I couldn't, I had to physically move, and I'm thinking about, that makes me think about Toni Morrison in the beginning of A Mercy, where she says, no, I can't remember, there are two questions or something like that.
I just taught it in the fall.
And can you read? And can you read? And can you read? That makes me, I'm like, oh, she can read. She, of course, Florence, the character, and Toni Morrison and Robin. But the way that she's engaging with the materials of those photographs, the thumbprint, that all of these things can lead her to the story of the history in such imaginative ways. That she's the way that she's reading the photographs and how they generate language. I'm so struck by that, and I think a lot about this is just to say more directly. I think a lot about the people who raised me, especially my mom and her family. My mom had this cast iron skillet. She was very close with her grandfather. And she had this cast iron skillet that she would sometimes take out after he passed when I was 6. So, most of my life, she would just take it out and oil the skillet. She really rarely cooked with it. Then she'd put it away. It was like she was spending time. She was spending time with him. And also, he worked on the trains, and my grandmother lived in this complex right near the train tracks. And so, his was the Santa Fe train. And she would be like, Granddaddy, Granddaddy, and we all run, and whoever, everybody, grown people, young, and we all run and we wave to the train. And only 10 years ago or so did I realize I was waving. I was somewhere in the Midwest or something, visiting a school, and I waved, and I had this moment where I was like, oh, yes, he was on the train, but for the first time I was like, oh, he's not on the train, but he is also the train. But it was the feel like especially, I think a lot about like the ways that my family, just like how they taught us how to be, and how my mom and her mom and siblings, how they taught us how to be in touch with places that might look far on a map for people who might not be here, and in the present plane, that are here. And I think that somewhere along the way, like thinking about that as a way that we then practice, just is really interesting in terms of like an imaginative strategy that I sometimes am aware of and sometimes am.
Thank you again so much for reading. My question is back to the glitches. You were speaking about like these glitches of grief. My question is like, what are the what are the ways in which like you kind of sift through them? Because I know like being in a home with multiple languages myself, you know, and like there's like a lot of like, I don't know, like my parents are Lao, so there's a lot of like Lao-ish that happens. Like what makes you like what makes you like hone in on that one particular glitch is as hard and as dark as it can be. Like what is the process in that? Like briefly, sorry.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, when you hear glitch, what do you think?
Okay, so for example, my mom, she was telling me, I don't remember the story, but it was like a girl in the neighborhood, she got pregnant young, right? And it was her and I having like our first conversation as like me being like a young woman and her being a mom, my moms, and she made the remark of like even dogs don't throw their puppies away. So like you bring up the dog like a trans-cultural kind of like that glitch kind of like links that home for me. So like I was just wondering like how did that, not necessarily how, but like what ways in which you sift through like all of the glitches like that are kind of transcultural and transnational like in your writing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you just reminded me, and I hadn't thought about this in a while, but when I was young, people would use that word as an insult. It's like, oh, so-and-so's a dog. Like, to mean different things depending on who you're talking about, but mostly it meant one thing. And I feel like I feel like to call myself, to think of myself as a dog, I feel like I can see like some members of my family be like, don't, what? Don't, like, people do that already, don't do that, you know? But for me, I'm like, but there's something there that feels vibrant and wild when I think of it on my terms, and I'm not like taking the other term. I'm just thinking about my terms and my kind of realm of associations and things. It feels so alive, and maybe part of that aliveness is has something to do. I don't know. I was going to say has something to do with it kind of being cast off, but I'm not sure about that. I know with hyenas, yes. Like they're so striking, and if you look at a hyena in the eye, which I've only done like the hyena was in terrible, huge hyena in this tiny little cage. It was so sad, and I looked at it and I was like, oh my god, I feel like we can hear each other. It was so present, and I am so taken by them and like their anatomy, and also the ways that in my dad's traditions and cultures, like they're like a threat and look, you know, they're not to be loved, and there's like all kinds of ideas about them. And I think because of that, I was always like, whoa, actually. But I think just wherever there's like, I think a lot has to do with like a kind of physical like moment of like the way that my mother says this, or like a missaying or a different way of saying the thing, especially when like a word like dime bank. Do you all know dime bank? Dime bank, maybe it's I remember my mom had a lot of Spanish, but is much stronger with her English. But I remember her being like, "Oh yeah, my dime bank," and I was like, "Oh." But then it's like, what does that mean? And like, what does it mean as like, what is a bank that like, what does it mean in terms of like how to read a bank to have that as the dime in front of it, not just like the play, but there's just so much information, and there's some things that just touch me or that I feel bewildered by and can't let go of, and I just keep going and staying with it. But it's often for me a physical feeling or just like it strikes me, and I write it down. I don't know why, it might be weird, but I return to it. Oh, that's good. That sounds like a performance.
Do we have any other questions?
Thank you so much for this amazing reading, and it's so gorgeous and deeply moving, so thank you. A lot of my students are here, and we read, and we spoke about it last night, but we read Santa Ana Shopping Carts, and I wanted maybe to kind of give my students a kind of window into our conversation about that poem, and how you said it was a bit of a breakthrough poem for you. And a lot of my students are from California and from Southern California, and I think, I think in terms of my own experience coming from Phoenix, Arizona, like art and the poem and writing was always away from home, like, and somewhere else. And so it took me a long time to think or learn or get the confidence or figure out how to write about where I come from and specific region that I'm from. And I feel like I love teaching that poem because, so many of us are from California or Southern California, and I have students here who were like, I know these streets and I know this intersection, and it was just a really powerful moment in our class conversation. So I just was hoping that maybe you could speak to that poem and how it was a breakthrough poem and what it means to write about where you come from, and the complexities of where you come from.
Thank you for, I said thank you to Brendan, but for anybody who spent time in that poem in class, thank you for spending time. I was saying that it's interesting, there's like a little kernel that's in that poem that I brought to workshop when I was in graduate school, and I was saying to Brandon and folks yesterday that I remember the response that it got, which was like, what is, like, and then like Santa Ana, like what are we supposed to know about Santa Ana? And it was like very kind of like, felt like thrown away, and didn't say, but had the language, which I shared yesterday, like it was the center of the world for me. And then I don't know if like because of that, I don't know what happened between that little kernel and the rest, but I know that it hit me, and also that I moved back to California for a couple of years while my sisters were finishing high school, and it was hard to leave New York and move back. I moved back for a very specific reason, and it felt like a loss to leave. And I was like working a bunch of jobs and stuff. And one of the things that I did though was I worked at the Bowers Museum, which was then being used as a cultural center with many middle schoolers in Santa Ana. And I was like, if I can just like write with them and bring stuff, I'll do it for free. Which I did, because I just realized thinking with other people about writing and making work together was such a critical practice for me, and also with young people specifically. But I was like spending a lot of time just like the grocery cart feels like, I'm thinking the poet Tato Laviera, Puerto Rican poet, La Careta made a U-turn, is the name of his book, one of his books, and there's a grocery cart on the front, which I just thought of now. But like the grocery cart, I remember being like, I want a grocery cart. Like the kid, like people would like for the summer, I had these friends who had a grocery cart. They would do all kinds of things with the grocery cart. like shuttling each other around, and my mom was, like she was not into that, but I remember, and like seeing like the grocery carts all around being used in all these different ways. And I always was worried that the magnet, whatever the line is, it's like you can't have it. It's like, okay, I will. But just like seeing, like both like as an adult, like seeing what there was that struck me that I could see differently because I had maybe left and come back, but then also remembering the childhood things and who was there and where things were, and it felt like a charged thing to like to speak the various things that felt like home, that felt like they had shaped my language, and not just my language, but like my